Climate crisis. How science fiction's hopes and fears can inspire humanity's response. This is by Chris Pack, lecturer English Literature, Swansea University of the UK, on The Conversation. One example is, for example, terraforming Mars. You see the forest of cranes before you reach the coast. In the heat haze, machinery resounds in the middle distance, shifting and tamping dirt with earth-shattering force. Beyond the construction site, the sea sparkles under the sun. Traversed by ships old and new, it seems the whole city takes its cue from the coast. There's always so much being built, demolished, and rebuilt. Those in power push ahead with their enduring program to reshape the world by building new land. This is a society that's being transformed for a particular vision of the future, to build new worlds able to meet the challenges of a soaring population, more space and new modes of living. But what kind of future is being built and at what cost? This is not science fiction. It's a real story of land reclamation in the 1980s and 90s Hong Kong, where I grew up, he says. Land reclamation involves the filling of water bodies with soil to extend land or create artificial islands. And China, we know, is doing that. Housing and infrastructure on the scale seen in Hong Kong is only possible because of how much land, over 70 square kilometers of it, was reclaimed, but this has come at a cost to people, biodiversity, and the integrity of wildlife habitats alike. It was during my childhood in the city, part of which was so recently submerged beneath the ocean, that I first began to speculate about the drastic ways we transform space and the unforeseen impacts this has. As a child, immersed in science fiction classics such as Frank Herbert's Dune, I quickly realized that fiction can help us consider, imagine, and work through these unforeseen impacts. And so it's no surprise that climate fiction, or sci-fi, has quickly become a recognized genre in recent years. From Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behavior to Omar El-Akkad's American War, people are clearly interested in imagining possible futures. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. People interested in imagining possible futures as a way of considering how we're going to get ourselves out of this mess. If there is something that we can be fairly sure of, it's that the future will be radically different to what we had imagined, and that it will demand adjustment. That's why authors of science fiction are consulted by organizations and governments to help us think about the risks and challenges of the future in ways inaccessible to other disciplines. As COP26, the climate conference in Glasgow, the delayed 2020 UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow approaches us. It's over with, of course. We urgently need more of this imaginative impulse. Science fiction has certainly already played a part in this narrative. Harnessing the sun's energy has a long history in science fiction, and Arthur C. Clarke is often credited with coming up with the idea of the solar cell-powered geostationary communication satellite. NASA's satellite system, meanwhile, is crucial for monitoring climate change and can plausibly be traced back in part to science fiction's capacity for thinking about worlds and systems. And of course, spaceships and space stations. Indeed, our expansion into space is an invention of science fiction. Inspired by my early days in Hong Kong, I went on to shape a career researching science fiction with a focus on technical systems that transform the planet we live on, the idea of terraforming and geoengineering. If terraforming is the modification of other planets to enable habitation by life on Earth, geoengineering can be defined as the planetary modification of the Earth, such as the deliberate intervention in the climate system. As the controversial debate about geoengineering becomes increasingly urgent, given the catastrophic failure to curb emissions, science fiction about terraforming and geoengineering can help us imagine possible configurations of solutions to the climate crisis and their implications. A closer look at this particular example will also show why embracing this form of thinking is so crucial for the climate crisis more generally as well. The power of storytelling. Proposals for geoengineering and terraforming are informed both by history and by the stories we tell each other. What science fiction can do is imagine and think through the political as well as scientific implications of the technological choices we make. Science fiction stories speculate on, diagnose, and illustrate the experience and the problems wrapped up in global debates about mitigation and adaptation. The aim of science fiction is not to solve society's problems through specific works of science fiction, although these works do offer solutions that we as readers are invited to critique, revise, advocate for, and even adopt. Nor is science fiction about prediction. We therefore should not evaluate science fiction according to its success or failure in this regard. Rather, the role of science fiction is to speculate on possibilities. Science fiction, then, should not be read in isolation. The fictional space is an imaginative realm of testing ideas and values, and for attempting to imagine futures that could inform our societies now. The genre seeks to push beyond the assumptions of a singular time and place by providing a range of alternative ways of convincing ideas, contexts, and relationships. Science fiction asks to be challenged. It asks for us to hold one story up against another, to consider and interrogate the worlds portrayed and what they might tell us about our stance on crucial contemporary issues. Reading such fiction can help us to think speculatively beyond the technical aspects of adaptation, mitigation, and indeed intervention, and to understand the stances that we as people and as societies take towards these concerns. This is an idea behind my book, in which I survey the history of stories about terraforming, geoengineering, space, and climate change, what science fiction teaches us that technologies are not simply technical systems, science is not simply a theoretical technical endeavor, rather a practice of science, and the development of technologies are also fundamentally social and cultural. This is why many researchers use the word socio-technical to describe technological systems. A geoengineered planet. In the real policy, world fiction informed the imagination. Some imagine a future world covered by machines sucking CO2 out of the air, pumping it into porous rock below. Others imagine one powered by a portfolio of vast wind and solar farms, hydroelectric and geothermal plants. Some imagine business largely continuing as usual, with only moderate changes in how we produce and use energy, and little to no change to how we organize our economies and our lives. And some suggest we send planes into the stratosphere, pumping out particulates that will reflect sunlight back into space and turn the sky white. It's this last vision, solar radiation management, SRM, that has been the subject of particular intense debate. SRM involves controlling the amount of sunlight trapped in Earth's atmosphere. A number of scientists, including Ken Caldeira and David Keith, sometimes referred to as the GeoClique, advocate for further research into SRM, but they are strongly opposed by various pressure groups. Bill McGuire, a patron of scientists for global responsibility and emeritus professor of earth sciences at UCL, recently wrote a science fiction novel, Skyseed 220, which imagines the terrifying failure of a nanotech-based approach to solar radiation management. This novel describes the impossibility, given our current state of knowledge, of foreseeing the consequences of this speculative technology. Proposals for solar radiation management vary enormously, but the most common forms involve brightening marine clouds or injecting particles into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight away from the Earth. Doing so, it is proposed, would help to cool the Earth, though it would do nothing to remove carbon or other carbon equivalent gases from the atmosphere, nor would it address ocean acidification. More extravagant ideas include building sunshades in space and placing them in various orbital configurations. If this idea sounds like it comes straight out of a science fiction novel, that's because it does. Such orbital mirrors featured in James Orberg's 1981 work New Earths and Louis McMaster's Bujold 1998 novel Comar. Transforming planets. But we can terraform, what can terraforming tell us about geoengineering in Earth? The idea of terraforming places beyond Earth, planets or other spatial bodies to make them more amenable to human life has been a mainstay of science fiction for decades. The necessity of maintaining life support systems in space, habitats and spaceships draws on the same science that underpins technologies for addressing climate change. Such stories pose many pertinent questions that we should heed as we consider next steps on Earth or beyond it. In its broadest sense, terraforming refers to transforming other planets or cosmic bodies so that life from Earth can live there. Entrepreneurs such as Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX, have brought terraforming and the colonization of Mars to our imagination through an ambitious project to put people on the planet within the decade. Musk is not alone. Other entrepreneurs such as Richard Branson from Virgin Galactic and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origins are also competing to exploit space and get humankind out there. Contemporary visions of terraforming Mars must contend with recent assessments that show it's not possible to terraform the planet with present-day technology given the lack of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that would enable an atmosphere to be created on Mars. But scientific research into terraforming continues to carve out a space for future possibilities. Although it's a subject of current scientific research, the word terraforming was in fact coined by science fiction writer Jack Williamson, writing as Will Stewart in 1942 short story Collision Orbit, set on a terraformed asteroid. The story describes terraforming technologies that include a paragravity installation sunk into the heart of the asteroid, which provides some gravity. Oxygen and water, meanwhile, are generated from mineral oxides, a process that releases absorptive gas to trap the feeble heat of the far-off sun. In the story, the greenhouse effect is harnessed to make other cosmic bodies habitable, and what makes terraforming possible here are new ways of manipulating atomic matter. But Williamson is also concerned with the unintended consequences of new inventions and new ways of generating energy. New energy systems make terraforming feasible for small groups and large institutions alike, promising a reconfiguration of power throughout the solar system by the story's end. Lessons from fiction for the future. I focused here on the ideas of geoengineering and terraforming because they represent the most outlandish theories or proposals when it comes to potential solutions to the climate crisis. But of course, everything I've written applies just as much to thinking about less grandiose proposals. The questions and speculations offered by science fiction are endless, and it would be a fool's errand to attempt to outline those that are the most pertinent or important or relevant to COP26. So instead, I'd like highlighting those books that I have stayed with me the most in my time working in this era, and explain why I think they might prove fruitful food for thought for anyone attending, debating, or simply following COP26. He talks about Ursula K. Le Guin's The Word for World is Forest, 1972. Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars Trilogy, 1992 to 1996. And then he goes to 3 is Ian McDonald's Luna Trilogy, 2015 to 2019. This is by The Conversation, written by Chris Pack, lecturer in English Literature, Swansea University. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support.